Chair.
Just for tonight, trust me. I was pretty unhappy about it too. Somebody had to go to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Call to order the regular meeting of council, Town of Oliver, February 10th, 2020. Ask the acting CAO if there's any late items to add to the agenda.
No, there is not, Your Worship. Oh, there is? Oh, sorry.
Just that we have the, adding the late item for the library update under delegations to
Okay.
H2. It's on your agenda, but just to amend the agenda.
Okay. Motion to adopt the agenda as amended. In a second, Councillor Schwarzenberger. All the questions, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. We got adoption of prior minutes, adoption of January 28th, 2020 special open meeting minutes. Gonna move to adopt those. Councillor Schwarzenberger, seconded by Councillor Grace. All the questions, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And adoption of January 27th, 2020 regular open council meeting minutes. Can we get a mover to adopt those? Councillor Schwarzenberg. All the questions, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Committee reports. We got the January 27th, 2020 committee of the whole meeting minutes for receipt. Get a mover for those. Move receipt. Councillor Schwarzenberg, second by Councillor Bentamila. All the question, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Moving to water matters, I believe we've moved the 5-year financial plan bylaw to water matters.
Yes.
So I will pass it over to the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Town of Oliver's 5-year financial plan is here for 3 readings tonight. The council has considered all the adjustments to the operating budget for the general general capital funds. So therefore, here tonight is the bylaw for 3 readings, and hopefully will be adopted at the next meeting. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any comments, questions, Council?
I move the recommendation that the 5-year financial plan bylaw 1393 be read a first, second, and third time, and that the 5-year financial plan bylaw 1393 be scheduled for adoption at the next available council meeting.
Second, Councillor Grace. Any further comment, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Anything to report? Or Councillor Sidhu?
Nothing for this, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Machial, anything to report?
2 budget meetings with, for the general budget. I came to this meeting.
Okay.
That's it.
Moving to delegations. First one, RDOS 2020 tax requisition. John Kurvink, RDOS Manager of Finance. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, and council and staff. I'll try to go through this fairly quickly, but stop me if you have any questions during the presentation or at the end. The first bit of the presentation is just talks about, for those of you that aren't familiar, the regional district, just how it's structured differently than a municipality or a not-for-profit or a private entity for that matter. We don't have one budget or a couple of budgets. We have over 143, 151 this year in total, I think. Every budget is in its own silo. The funds that are raised for that area stay in that area, and the surplus or deficit has to be absorbed by that area, so we don't have any ability to move money around. Our budget process started way back in August, and we're hoping to complete it by March 31st, which we have to do by statute. We had 3 workshops, one in November and 2 in December, and the public consultation process is what we're undergoing right at the moment. So in terms of the budget, our services, we kind of have 3 categories, or 4 really. Regional services, which are the ones you all participate in, which are like 911, emergency planning, trails. Rural services, which is the services that the electoral areas participate in, which is like electoral area administration, building inspection. We also have shared services, which I don't have on this overhead, which is the services that you share with the electoral area. So in this case, all the work you do with all of our parks and rec, you share with Area C. And then local services, which just apply to an electoral area. So in the 2020 requisition, things that impact the swing of how the pie is sliced, if you will, or property assessments are obviously a key factor. This year you come in at 4.84%, a little bit higher than last year, and more than the RDOS average. So the significance of that is that you'll pay a greater part, as the pie is sliced, all of the slice of the pie, all things being equal, will be larger this year, just because of the shift in assessments between the different electoral areas and municipalities. So I have the program change, the capital budget requests on here just for completeness to show them to you, but a lot of these don't apply to the town of Oliver. So when you see all the staffing changes, a lot of them don't impact your tax requisition. So in terms of public works, you can see some of the positions that are proposed to be added this year. And it's a total of $416,000 in staffing for this year, and $616,529 carrying forward from this point forward. In terms of capital requests, a lot of capital things going on. A lot of them, most of them don't impact, I think all of them have no impact on the town of Oliver in particular. But it's $2.6 million in capital requests. In terms of the grant, these are the regional grant needs. So electoral areas have community grant needs, so they put money aside which they can grant to not-for-profit organizations. But we also have regional grant needs, which the organization has to prove they're really impacting the whole region. And so the board has a number of requests every year, and these are the ones that made the grade. And I don't know how to spell Meadowlark there. I think there's an A after the E. But Meadowlark received $5,000. The Kids Festival, which came back after I don't know how many years it was away from Penticton, it's getting $5,000. Animal Lifeline is getting $800, and just for your interest, they only applied for $800, so they were pretty frugal in their ask, and so they got exactly what they were asking for. The last amount there is $30,000 for the South Okanagan Community Foundation, and that's year 2 of a program where they're trying to build capacity in the rural areas for fundraising and for people to gift funds to electoral areas rather than focus on other things. And so we'll see the fruits of that over the years as they get more funds coming in that are targeted to some of the smaller areas. So our total budget this year is $57.8 million, up 11.2%. You can see the municipal debt repayments going down, so some debts have dropped off for us this year, and we collect all the debt for municipalities, and that's just a statute related thing. So when Oliver needs to borrow, they do the paperwork, it comes to us, we borrow the money, and you make the payments through us, and then us through the MFA. So the items that impact the town of Oliver this year under regional services, you can see 911 is going down by $2,814, and that's just decreases in their budget. Emergency planning also is dropping by 2,385. General government's got a slight increase, so the 1,613, that's the actual change in requisition for all of it, so it's $1,613 more. It's a bit of an increase. Environmental conservation dropped by $5,532, and that's really just this year. They didn't have as many applications for grants, so they were able to drop the requisition because they've got surplus funds from prior year where they haven't, or we've collected the money to grant out, but the applications just didn't come in for those funds. So the program hasn't been curtailed in any way, it's just there were less grants. Regional transit is one of your increases, it's up $82.97, and that's really, we get the budget passed to us from DC Transit. As well, last year, the service didn't start until the fall, and so the deficit that they ran in the service in 2019 carries forward to 2020. Regional growth strategy is going up $34.40, and this is the year that they're doing the regional growth strategy update, and so they've got additional spending for consultants, and some of the planner time gets allocated to that service. The water board's going up $1,111. That's also a requisition we get. In terms of shared services, mosquito control is decreasing, and that's the way that budget is apportioned, and it's probably been apportioned that way for a long time. They look at a 3-year average of utilization in terms of where they're spraying, where the experts think the larvae are, and so depending every year they'll switch the allocation. So you're going down, so clearly they've determined that there shouldn't be a mosquito problem as much this year in the town of Oliver, so hopefully that works out. Economic development's going up. That's a lift in the Oliver, not a lift in the Oliver tourism budget, but a lift in the apportionment. As you know, now it's come under the regional district, so you're not cutting a check out of your funds. The arena's going down, a large reduction in expenditures compared to last year. In terms of Oliver Parks and Rec, the parks is also going down, and that's because they've increased the rental revenue, so there's a revenue pickup that they hope to have. The pool's got a large increase, their capital budget's going up, and the largest increase, of course, is the recreation hall, which is going up $114,000, and you're probably well aware from Parks and Rec making presentations to council. I'm sure they have a $200,000 capital project. So in terms of the tax requisition, I'll show you this slide, but it's $1.5 million, a significant amount of money that the town of Oliver contributes to the regional district, and it's gone up over 2019, $81,000 in total. So this shows you overall, and you can see where you sit compared. You're going up 5.49%, and your percentage of the total rec overall has dropped this year a little bit, 7.76 to 7.73%. But that's the way the pie shakes up on regional services. This is a detail, and I've got on my slide, these overheads, the font never comes out, or you have to obviously put the numbers over several slides, but your overall requisition on a per taxpayer basis is going up $13, based on average assessment, about $13.03 per average residential property. That's how the $81,041 increase compares. So we've done an overhead just to show the pie. So if it's an average house of $364, $153, how the tax bill of $465, so you can see out of the $465 an average assessment we're tracked, recreation makes up $264 of that, environmental conservation $6, other regional services $121, refuse, the Oliver landfill $21. So I think that's interesting because it shows at least on average how the money gets split out. So that concludes the presentation. We've got the overheads up on the website in detail, and I'm certainly happy to feedback and questions, and you can also email me or call, but that's the presentation for 2020, our budget, so thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions, comments, Councillor? I'll let Petra say something.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't wanna leave John to leave without
Yeah.
telling you anything at all. Thank you for the presentation. Working through the budgeting process, I mean, I only see our side of it, I don't see all that John has to input and take out and move around and shift around, and I can't even imagine how complicated the process it is, and he does a really good job helping us all through it and helping us understand and answering the same question 5, 6, 7 times over and over until we get it, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Without giving too much away, I'm a sucker for a good pie chart. And that pie chart is really, I mean, when you see where we are in relation to other communities, it can sometimes look like we're a bit high, and where does that come from? But when you can see it broken out and into services that we're choosing to participate in and choosing to pay for and choosing to invest, and I think it's helpful. So thank you.
Welcome. Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted the general public to understand, one of the things that really hit me when I looked at this over the weekend was that the arena went down by almost $100,000. And that's because the ongoing maintenance and fixes to the arena have gone down, but I hope the public understands that there's a big project coming up that will need to keep the arena as a useful building in our community, and that will probably be reflected in next year's budget, I assume.
Yeah, some of it was dependent, I know there was some we had in last year's budget that didn't come to fruition or the timing was off, and so I think you're right, infrastructure is a major challenge. Probably, I don't know how much at the town of Oliver, but certainly the regional district, there's a big gap between kind of where the assets are and where, if money were no object, they should be. And so it's a challenge, I think, for kind of all municipalities, probably in regional districts. It's a scary number when you look at the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to discuss the arena in detail and strategize on plans moving forward for sure with some of the significant capital repairs that are required for that facilities. Thank you.
Your Worship.
Much appreciated.
Have a good night.
Yeah, I think so.
We got the library update, fall 2019 library update from Don Nelson, Okanagan Regional Library Chief Executive Officer. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Council and Your Worship, for the opportunity just to present to you. What I'm hoping to do tonight is just do a quick overview of the library system as a whole, and then finish off with just comments about things in the Oliver Branch and what's happening down here. So, let's see if we can get this to go here. Point the right way, that'll help. There we go. So overall, we serve a large population. It's about 400,000 people, and so we'd be one of the larger libraries actually in Canada. We're somewhere in the top 25 libraries as far as that. Geographically, it's spread over a large area from Golden all the way across through the Columbia Shuswap down to the Okanagan Valley and then over across to Princeton. The exception to that is just the city of Penticton. So it's a large geographic area as well. We've got 31 branches as well as the web, of course, so a lot of our business comes over the internet as well now, but 31 locations would include 2 new ones that you may not have been aware of in the last time we would have presented. One of them is the UBC Okanagan campus, so that they would have pick-up and drop-off location, which it's unmanned, but it's within their library, so they look after that for us. The other one is on the west side, it's called West Side Learning Lab, and it's on West Bank First Nations land, and it's basically primarily technology. There's very few books that are in that, and that's what the West Bank First Nations and the folks in that area wanted, was some focus on that particular thing when we'd done surveys before we opened that up. So those are a couple of our newer locations. We have a 24-member board, and David Mattis is your councillor on there. So each of our board members are elected officials from one of our members, and he's also chair of our finance committee, so we appreciate having him. Wi-Fi is, of course, one of the things that's a key service. You've probably seen it around the library down here. People hanging around, particularly in the summertime, all hours of the night, wanting to use that particular service. And particularly a lot of the travelers and people who come, just seasonal workers, find that a huge service to help them out. We have about 300 public terminals within our library branches, and between 500 and 600 devices that our IT department would be supporting altogether. One of the trends, if you went back a few years ago, people said, is there a future for the library? And yes, there is. As a matter of fact, usage is increasing, but that usage is changing. And one of the things that's changing a lot is the increase in programs. We had a little over 157,000 programs, or people that attended programs, I should say, last year throughout our branches. That's about an 8% increase from a couple of years earlier. You'll see with our materials, that's the circulation of materials, it's up about 3.5 million, a little bit, just almost 2% above what it had been a couple of years earlier. But it's changed a little bit. So if you look on this chart, you'll see it's a little bit off the screen there, but the top one says a 47% increase, which is for the electronic materials that we circulate. So that's e-books and e-audiobooks. So that's skyrocketing, and the other types of materials we circulate, like books and magazines, that type of thing, is holding relatively flat, dropping off maybe 1% a year or so, but it's still by far the most business that we do, almost 2.8 million, but it is a switch. Other trends are things like training courses, which is lynda.com. People can get that both at home and within our branches, so that's a very popular service. You can see it's gone up 55% over a couple of years earlier, the use of that. And a lot of time spent, if you want to learn a language, there's a number of languages you can learn through things like Rosetta Stone. And there's all kinds of databases and other things which you can get both at home and within the library, so it just depends on what your interests are. So we mentioned that one of the things we've also done is programs for adults, which we wouldn't have done 5 or 6 years ago. We were primarily focused on children. Adult programs include things like learning languages, getting assistance with government resources. There's a lot of things such as games and learning, literacy learning, that sort of thing. Fellow in this picture, I think I mentioned at the regional district, is standing in front of a green screen, and he wanted to learn that type of technology. And so I guess he decided he always wanted to be a fighter pilot, so he's dropped himself into the cockpit there and looking like he's having a good time. But even in senior years, you can want to learn some of those kind of skills. And I think a lot of seniors are feeling that they've been left behind, so the library is a place where they find it's a good place to come and learn what they need to. Children's programming, of course, is still a key staple. Summer Reading Club is always popular, and that increases a little bit every year. But we've added science, STEAM programs, which are science, technology, engineering, and arts and math. Again, to develop some of those digital skills which everybody needs to get by in the 21st century. And so it's not just reading and traditional skills that the library has, but a lot of this other type of literacy that's also needed. We have things like American Sign Language courses, if that's needed in a few branches, in partnership with some other partners. Story time and those kind of things, and then just some of the games and some of the little technology things, little Ozobots and other things, just to learn how to do basic coding and other things, which are very popular. And oftentimes the parents there with the kids are actually more or as interested as the kids are in learning how to do that sort of thing. One of the things we're doing is, as I mentioned, with a lot of this digital literacy, is we're finding if we can get additional donations in some of our areas, we're opening additional spaces and additional equipment. And so we started with that West Side Learning Center, which I mentioned last time. That opened just about a year ago. It was in February, middle of February last year. In the middle of, or early summer, we opened one in the Kona Downtown Library, and that was through corporate donations and friends of the library, so they raised a significant amount of money that allowed us to open a small makerspace there. Then we were also able to get some grants from the Columbia Basin Trust, which applied to Golden and Revelstoke. And so Golden was able to finish their space and get that open within their library in October. Revelstoke's hoping to have their space done because they needed to add on to their branch a little bit, and that should be done in the end of probably early summer is what it's looking like right now. And with I think it's within 10 days or so, we'll be making an announcement about Vernon Library, which also has a big donation which they've just received, and we'll be announcing the funder. And they're hoping to get that open later this spring. So as we're able to get donations, we're able to kind of move forward if there's space within the library and if that's something that that community needs. So those are different things that the library is involved in that you may not have seen before. As far as funding, I'll just quickly comment on that. We're about $20 million budget this year. Jump ahead. There we go. If you look at the graph on the right, it says about 92% of that funding for this year is coming from the local taxpayers, and about a little over 5% is from the provincial government. There's other small amounts like fines from damaged books and that sort of thing. If you look on the graph on the left, you'll see that it's a different type of a shape. The provincial funding in that one from about 25 or 30 years ago shows almost 25% funding coming from the province. So what's happened is the province has frozen their funding for the last 10 plus years, and prior to that it was kind of held pretty flat for years. And so what's happened is that pickup has happened on the local taxpayer. There's been, if you were at UBCM, you'll know that there's been a big push by the communities, by municipal communities, to get the province to start to contribute again. We're hoping that when their budget comes out in a couple months, somewhere in the next bit, that they will have that included. It's in one of the many hundreds of recommendations that they've had from their budget committee. We'll see what they end up deciding on that. But to bring it up to where it should be, it would need to be around 20 million for the libraries as a whole, and it's about 14 million. So it's a big gap that if the libraries of the province had that, it would certainly help with the local funding, would allow us to do a lot of things which we're now kind of pressed to keep up with. I did mention a little bit with some of the electronic resources, and just a comment of thanks to you for supporting us in the push that we have, in the sense that we're challenged to get the resources that we need. The typical book, electronic book, is about $60 to $80 for us. It would cost an average person $15 if you just went out and bought it. That's because of the publishers have put those kind of charges on libraries, and they've also have restrictions in that we can only circulate it a certain number of times and it disappears, and or within a couple of years it disappears. And the latest from one of them is that it takes about three or 4 months after a book's published before libraries are even allowed to access it at all. So there's a strong push from both the Canadian Urban Library Congress, which we're a member of, as well as from the American Library Association, and from the municipal level in particular, to pressure both federal governments and others to cause the publishers to kind of play back in the game with libraries, so libraries have access to these things without incredible costs. And libraries do allow everybody in the community to access things that not just depending on your wealth, they're able to go out and buy it for yourself. So we're hoping that continued pressure that comes from this level and from the library voice will cause some changes over the next year or two, so that we don't get kind of frozen out of that growing market that is where people are really heading these days. Expenses, as you'd expect, about half of our expenses are for salaries and wages. Facilities around 20%, books and materials about 15%. Other things like computers and some reserve contributions and debt make up some of the rest of it. So the big 3 or 4 are the materials, the facilities, and the staffing. One of the things that we have, just like what you found, I think, is our staffing turnovers. We've got a lot of long-term staff that are retiring, and I think we had something like 12 of them retired in the past year, and they represented 280 some odd years of service, which was somewhere between 23 and 24 years on average. And so when you have that kind of changeover, it allows opportunities for new people, but you also lose a lot of knowledge. And so that's one of our challenges, but I think this past week there's about 10 postings that are out for various positions again. So, and we're constantly bringing in new people to train. And so that's one of our challenges, but it's a good challenge because we do get new people. We give good value, I believe. If you take a look at us compared to provincial average, there's some figures there. If you look halfway down, you'll see total expenditures per capita on average for the province is about $53. We're at $46. If you look at the total expenditures, not including facilities per capita, provincial average is $48.67, and we were at $34.34. We're about 30% below on what provincial averages are. And given that we would be one of the larger library systems in the province, if we're that much lower, it means that there's a significant number that are higher than that average. So one of our board's challenges is going to be, it has been, to try and, after years of just kind of going up with inflation, trying to close that gap a little bit. So this past year there was a higher increase of about 5% was their budget change. And a lot of that's going into strategic planning for some of the new initiatives that we need to do to kind of close some of those gaps and keep up with what everybody else is up to in the library world. Jump ahead a little bit. Where's the future going? Definitely we're going to have more programs, more programming for adults as well as children, and depending on the needs of the community. Digital literacy is definitely going to increase. We'll need to continue to spend more on electronic resources, books and materials. And as I mentioned, we're just in the process of partway through developing our new strategic plan, which should be received by the board, I think, done and received by sometime in May, we expect now. And that will give further direction, but I think it'll be along those lines of trying to maintain what we have, but also build for the future on sort of serving people in a different way than we would have in the past. We have about 250 employees, so as I mentioned already, there's been some significant changes amongst them, but most of our employees are part of the QP, and we do have some librarians that are part of another union, and we have a couple of non-union branches. So what's happening in Oliver? Well, unfortunately Margie was not able to be with us tonight, but she left me some notes on what she thought was important that you might want to hear about. She said, as far as the use in the library, it's fairly similar to the prior year. It's just over 48,000 people that have attended people count that they would have had through the doors. Youth services programs, that they would have had 110 programs, an attendance of just over 3,000. Those would include things like they had class visits and tours from all 3 elementary schools. They had story time, Lego games on Saturdays. They did an unplug and play during the spring break. They had some special programs such as crafting and some STEAM and author visits, and of course summer reading club, and they had a dancing with a Miss Elena, and they did some read and rec in July with the Oliver and Tucklenut elementary schools. As far as adults programs, they had 53 with a little over 613 people. They included card making, author visits. They did something with Fortis BC on energy saving, emergency preparedness, and a Christmas open house refreshment that's done by the Friends of the Library. So they have a number of groups that meet in the library, scribblers, book clubs. There's a whole bunch of things like partnership with Desert Sun Counseling Resource Center. They're able to provide one-on-one computer tutoring workshops every Wednesday from October to March. And then they've done some partnership things with the South Okanagan Literacy Society. And so there's a number of programs that are happening in there. She had one patron's comment. I guess she said, the patron said that when I needed help or do not understand something online, the librarians in the Oliver Library have been very understanding. They also have that eagerness and patience to help with a great sense of humor, which I like. They don't look at me as if I have a few screws loose. They are always smiling. It's so nice to go to the library when you have that kind of cheerfulness. because a lot of times when I'm not feeling well, there's smile and thoughtfulness does a lot. And I think that's one of the things that the library has become and is becoming, is a bit of a hub, a meeting place in the community. The announcement that, of course, we mentioned, all of you, you would have heard a week or so ago, is that we're planning to relocate the branch in later on this spring, probably be somewhere around the end of May, beginning of June, that will be open in the new space. And so the new space is in the mall just down off of Highway 97. Have good parking, and it'll be a little bit more of a squared out space, so should have a meeting room as well within it. So we're hoping that that will be very convenient for people and well used, and we've been in a great place for 20 years, but we think this is a good change that will work well for the library as well. So there'll be probably a week or two at least within May somewhere where things will be a little bit disrupted in service, but it'll be try and make that as minimal as possible, probably serve out of the old location while we're trying to do the shuffle and move. So that's what I had to report, and hopefully if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Don. No, it's a good report, great information. Library is definitely a valued service in any community, and here as well. It's awesome to hear that we're getting this service at the lowest possible price. So efficient. That's awesome. Any other questions, council? Comments? Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the presentation, Don. I just wanted to, I guess, comment on the new location.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I heard where it was going, because it seemed to be in a different direction than what we heard the library wanted to do. I've heard sort of mixed reviews from the community, some being they're happy about the parking. I know the local preschools in particular are concerned about walking there now, as it's quite a bit further than they were, and they feel like they actually may not be able to utilize it anymore. So I'm just wondering sort of what the reasoning was behind the new location that was chosen.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. We were kind of looking, not sure whether this will be our long-term forever location, but it's where we were existing without getting too far into different things. It would required us probably giving up a bit of the space that we had with the way things were looking, which would have been difficult to do. The shape of the present one has always been a bit of a challenge, because it's got little juts and jags, and so the layout, size of staff space versus other spaces is not probably as we would always have done. And so this other location seemed to meet the needs, in the sense that we've been looking for many years for other options around the community. And this has good parking. We think that though it may be further for some people, it'll be closer for others. And the comments we've gotten so far around the community is that with the adjacent stores, the grocery stores and pharmacies and the bank and everything there, a lot of people are saying it'll actually help them, because they can kind of do several trips kind of combined into one. Yeah, so we're hoping that the space is fairly similar, high ceilings and the shape of it, and it does allow a meeting room, which will help us for some of our programming as well. So yeah, nothing's perfect, but it's a good next step, we think. So.
Thank you.
One question.
Councillor McKenna?
I have a question about funding. I think that I read somewhere in there, but I didn't see it up on the slides, that a couple of years ago there was a shift to kind of make things a little more equal. The smaller libraries were being subsidized by the larger, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I know since then we've had cutback in hours and changes in staff and that sort of thing. I'm wondering, how exactly does the funding work? Is it like per capita, per square meter? It said somewhere up there. And knowing that we're fairly rapidly growing based on the pace of growth over the last 10 or 20 years, if we compare it to that, at what point is that reassessed, and are we sort of compensated or adjusted accordingly?
Yeah, so the way our budget works, the board uses sort of several tools. The overall budget works is the board puts together a budget, and then the cost of that budget get reallocated back out based 50% on the population of the area and 50% on the assessed value of property, and that's relative to everybody else. The service level is, we come back with basically pulling into the local service locations, the population that service location would be serving. So, and that's based upon the census, the detailed census maps, and sort of where everybody would go based on the roads and that sort of thing. So, with that particular service level, the board has standards which they've come up with over the years to try and make sure that everybody's kind of fair. So, you have a certain element of sort of half of square foot per person, so for size wise, and then as far as the number of open hours to the community, it's also based upon the populations being served. So it might be as low as 10 or 15 hours for some very small communities, up to 50 or 60 hours for a larger community such as downtown Kelowna, where you're serving many thousands of people. And so that's how they kind of look at that. As far as Oliver, it was originally sized a little bit bigger when we moved 20 years ago. We expected more growth, and as you know, it hasn't happened for a while. We're hoping that it will start to continue to grow here, but the type of growth we're seeing here relative to the central Okanagan, where it's just kind of exploded, is quite a different growth. So it will be a fair while before this community grows enough that we would be needing a significantly larger service than we have now. I think you're sized for quite a while. The present population would probably have us, less than 5,000 square feet, and so this is it'll be a while till we grow enough that you need more here. But that's sort of the basic of how we do it. And as far as that adjustment, yes, we've been adjusting over the past 5 years, I guess, almost now that we've having to kind of reassess every time we had attrition and come up with the kind of adjusting areas that were overserved relative to the formula consultants and stuff they've come up with, and readjust that into areas that were underserved, and that was largely the faster growing areas. So it's been difficult for some of the smaller communities in all around our system, particularly in the south, but others that, and part of that is because with low assessment values, the amount that you're paying per person is less as well. So then if you're trying to balance what you're paying versus what you're getting, that means it's been some adjustments that we've had to do. We've probably adjusted almost $1 billion, which is about 5% of our budget over the last 4 or 5 years, which it's been difficult to do, but we're hoping we're getting, I think it'll probably always be a case where we're always looking at it, but we're hoping that, we've kind of done the more difficult parts of that now, and that, again, if we can get provincial funding and those kind of things to step back into the picture, that will help significantly.
Seeing no other questions, comments, thank you, Don, for coming down here, making a trip, and it's been informative. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you again, and thanks for your support of your library.
Moving on to development permit variance permits, we have zoning amendment 6422 Main Street, and I'll refer to the Director of Development Services, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Worship. Just give me a second to try to fix the PowerPoint's cutting off some of the wording here. If you want to tell a joke or something, you can.
Stand-up comedy.
I'll leave to Councillor Schwarzenberger to tell us about how the casino went.
Yeah.
I made a small but meaningful to me contribution recently. I know.
It's like it's aspect ratio or something.
The screen has been off the whole time. This rules the special one that gets it.
There we go.
No, that's Diane.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll make it work like this for good.
Okay.
Go full screen, go ahead, fine.
Thank you, Worship. This application is for a zoning amendment, bylaw 1380.12 for 6422 Main Street. This application is seeking a site-specific zoning amendment to allow an eating and drinking establishment with a drive-through food service at 6422 Main Street, legally known as Parcel C, which is a consolidation of lots 1 to 7 inclusive, Block 9, District Lot 2450S, SDYD, town site of Oliver. So the property location map is there. It's in the north portion of the town, just as you enter sort of the downtown core. There's a photo of the 2017 ortho. So it is an empty lot. It's been empty since since 1998 when a gas station was demolished. So the zoning for the site is town center. And the official community plan designation is town center as well. Some photos of the subject property. So on the left is showing the lane entry, and on the right shows the elevation along the lane as well. And the photo on the left in this next slide shows the south elevation from Veterans Avenue. And then the photo on the right is the corner from Veterans and Main Street. This is a photo showing the property frontage, which is the view from Main Street right now. And another photo there which shows the proposed driveway closure, which I'll get into in a second here. Same thing with the photo on the left, it shows the driveway closure and the existing sidewalk condition. And these last slides for showing the properties is on the left is the north portion of the property. So it's actually fenced about 30 feet back from the north property line right now. So there's sort of this vacant area now, but that would comprise part of this new development proposal. So the applicant is proposing to construct a 2-story mixed-use residential building with a 60-seat Dairy Queen on the bottom story and 4 2-bedroom dwelling units on the second story. Since a drive-through food service is not permitted within the town center zone, the site-specific zoning amendment is required. So this is the site plan here. So you see this is looking west. The black outline is the outline of the building there. And the right here is also outlined in black because this is a shelter for the vehicles here for the residences. So the idea is this Main Street entry, which used to sit here in the northeast corner of the property, will be closed, and so there'll be parking spaces across here now. And it was about a 50-foot wide entry before, which I presume was to accommodate the vehicles that were coming in for the gas station. And so the idea is now the drive-through will be accessed from Veterans Avenue close to the lane here. And then the people would exit sort of in the center part of the south portion of the property here, and then onto Veterans Ave there. And then also there would be parking accessed for the Dairy Queen here off of Veterans Ave. And then the residences would actually they would use the lane to access their parking back here in the northwest corner of the property. So some of the massing elevations you'll see, so from the southeast here, the Dairy Queen would comprise the whole bottom story, except there will be in the northeast corner, there is some like storage lockers, and then the idea is the residents can access here as well. And then there'll be 4 equal 2-bedroom units on the top story. And then there's also some stairway accesses, external ones here, and then on the north side as well. Some of the OCP guidelines that apply here in this situation, the town center designation of the OCP supports mixed-use retail and medium-density multifamily residential development above commercial uses. Several objectives of the town center designation speak to revitalizing downtown and reinforcing its role as the commercial and social heart of the community. And I also wanted to point out that the subject property is located within the town center development permit area, so thus a development permit will be required prior to construction. So at that time is when the detailed elevations and landscape plans will be submitted as part of that application, and it will require approval by council. So at this time, it's simply to allow the drive-through component. So just to touch on the driveway closure, so the application was referred to the Ministry of Transportation, and they provided preliminary approval of the zoning amendment with the condition that vehicle access to the site from Main Street is prohibited. So due to this requirement, staff are recommending that a security of $15,000 is paid by the developer as a condition of the zoning, and that's to ensure that the driveway is closed with proper barrier, curb, gutter, and sidewalk. So this $15,000 was 125% of the approximate cost that town staff had calculated to close that driveway appropriately. So this will help to make the site safer and allow for landscaping and buildings to be constructed across the entire frontage, which is the intent of the town center zone, right? So when you go downtown, the idea is buildings are close together, they cover the whole frontage, they don't have driveways from the front, so this will still be able to be achieved in this situation. Some other comments. The proposed building is situated at a 0 front setback to Main Street and spans the majority of the parcel, with the exception of this pocket park along the eastern 40 feet of the property. So this form of development, as I just mentioned, is consistent with the design trends in the area, which activates the street and enhances the pedestrian experience. So in this case, the drive-through, which is the subject of this discussion, it'll be accessed from Veterans Avenue. It'll be hidden, the majority of it will be hidden from the view of Main Street. So queued or parked cars will not be visible from Main Street. This design directs traffic to Veterans Avenue and the lane rather than the existing Main Street access, which improves the safety of the site. So now people will be turning at a proper intersection rather than going in and out of another driveway access from Main Street. So the existing Main Street access will be closed and replaced with a boulevard tree and landscaping, enhancing the aesthetics of the site. The proposed drive-through will be screened from the west, so that's something that will be important that will ensure happens through the development permit process, is this frontage here along the lane. It'll be ideal if this is screened, right? Because if you're a resident living to the west of the development, you won't want to see cars idling and going through a drive-through all day. And the last comment here is that an eating and drinking establishment is already a permitted use. So the discussion, as I mentioned, is about the drive-through component here, and that's the premise of the zoning amendment. So with that, some options for council is a second time and proceed to a public hearing, and that the holding of the public hearing be scheduled for February 24th, 2020, and that staff give notice of the public hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act, and that prior to adoption of the bylaw, the developer pays the cost of closing the existing driveway access for Main Street. Thank you.